There is a secret game being played, a game that every human being is born into, a game without visible rules, without a written manual, and without a referee in sight. Most wander through this existence as if blindfolded, stumbling from one challenge to another, convinced that life is nothing but chance, chaos, and struggle. But Florence Scovel Shinn, an artist and spiritual teacher of the early 20th century, declared something radically different. She said, "Life is not chaos. Life is not chance. Life is a perfectly ordered game, and like every game, there are rules, unseen yet unbreakable, hidden yet constantly at work." In her timeless book, The Game of Life and How to Play It, she unveiled those rules, laws so simple yet so profound that once understood, they could turn defeat into victory, scarcity into abundance, fear into confidence, and despair into joy. The question is not whether the game is being played. The question is, do you know how to play it? Many listening now may feel a silent ache. Perhaps money slips away no matter how hard one works. Perhaps relationships collapse despite every effort to hold them together. Perhaps health falters, dreams vanish, or hope grows faint. And yet, Florence insisted, none of this is random. Every word spoken, every image held in the imagination, every belief deeply buried in the heart, all are moves on the board of life. Every complaint is a move, every fear is a move, every declaration of faith is a move. The game listens, the game responds. If someone says, "I never get what I want," the game answers, "Very well, you will never get what you want." If another declares, "Doors of abundance open before me," the game whispers, "So it shall be." The invisible board does not argue, it does not judge, it reflects, always, perfectly. Imagine for a moment that life is a mirror. One can stand before it, frown, and demand that it smile. But the mirror only gives back the image presented to it. Life works the same way. It cannot give joy when one offers bitterness. It cannot give peace when one projects fear. It cannot give abundance when one clings to poverty in thought and word. Florence Scovel Shinn dared to tell people the truth. Change the image you hold, change the words you speak, change the belief you repeat, and the mirror, the game, must, by law, change in response. This teaching was not comfortable. To some it sounded too simple, to others too radical, but for those who dared to test it, lives transformed. There were men who discovered sudden opportunities where none existed before, women who spoke new words of faith and saw debts erased, families that were restored, dreams that were resurrected. It was not magic in the ordinary sense. It was alignment with spiritual law, a law that operates with precision, whether one believes in it or not. Just as gravity pulls at every step, whether acknowledged or denied, so too do these invisible rules guide every outcome in the game of life. And now, as you listen, consider this. You too are playing. Every thought is a card laid on the table. Every word is a move across the board. Every belief is a strategy, conscious or unconscious, but the true power lies here. The moment one becomes aware, the game shifts. Awareness is the first victory. That is why this journey begins not with techniques, not with formulas, but with awakening. Awakening to the truth that you are not a victim of random events. You are a participant in a divine design. You are, whether you know it or not, a player in a cosmic game. And so this narration invites you to step closer, to listen not with restless ears, but with a receptive heart, to walk with Florence Scovel Shinn through the invisible laws that govern every step of your journey. Together, we will uncover 10 truths, 10 movements in this grand symphony of existence. Each chapter will draw back the veil, revealing not theory, but practice, not distant philosophy, but immediate transformation. But first, before these chapters unfold, a question must linger. If your words are keys, which doors have you been unlocking? If your thoughts are seeds, what harvest is now approaching? If your imagination is a blueprint, what kind of house are you building in silence? The invitation is clear: to shift from accident to intention, from blind wandering to conscious mastery, from stumbling in the dark to walking in the light of divine law. This is not the story of Florence Scovel Shinn alone. It is your story, your game, your life. And as the chapters unfold, each listener will face a choice: to keep playing blindly, repeating old moves, or to step forward as a conscious player, declaring new words, imagining new outcomes, and aligning with the laws that never fail. Before the first chapter begins, pause for a moment. Look inward. Choose one word, a word of hope, a word of power, a word of faith, and let it be the first move in your new game. And if you feel called, write it in the comments below, not as a passing gesture, but as a declaration, a witness to yourself and to others. This is the word with which I begin anew. Thus the stage is set, the board is before you, the rules are waiting to be revealed, and now, let the game begin. Life as a spiritual game. Life, Florence Scovel Shinn declared, is not a random sequence of events. It is not a cruel stage where accidents reign and fortune favors only a chosen few. Life is a game, a spiritual game, precise in its laws, unfailing in its responses, and merciful in its design. This is not the kind of game played with dice, where chance decides the outcome. It is a game of consciousness, where thought is the move, word is the weapon, and belief is the strategy. And like every game, it has rules. One may ignore them, resist them, or deny them, but one cannot escape them. Florence observed how men and women moved through existence unaware that they were players. They worked tirelessly, prayed anxiously, hoped desperately, and yet found themselves repeating the same defeats. Why? Because they did not understand the nature of the game they were in. Imagine a child set in front of a chessboard without explanation. The pieces move with strict order, each designed for a purpose, each bound by limits and possibilities. But the child, unaware of these laws, moves blindly, knocking down pieces, inventing rules, and soon becomes frustrated. The game seems unfair, the board seems cruel, but the cruelty lies not in the board, nor in the pieces. It lies in the ignorance of the player. So it is with life. When one does not know the spiritual rules, defeat feels inevitable. But when the rules are understood, the game reveals itself not as an enemy, but as an ally. The first law Florence emphasized was this: what man thinks upon, he brings into form. Every thought is a seed, every belief is soil, every word is water, and life, as the faithful gardener, produces the harvest accordingly. If fear is sown, fear will grow. If doubt is sown, doubt will multiply. But if faith is sown, faith will blossom. If love is spoken, love will return. This is why Florence called life a game of boomerangs. Every move returns, every declaration circles back, every gesture, seen or unseen, eventually reappears at the player's doorstep. But here lies the mercy of this design. At any moment, one can choose a new move. The past does not chain the player forever. The present moment always opens the possibility of renewal. The game does not punish, it reflects. To the one who cries, "I am always unlucky," the game returns more loss. To the one who declares, "Everything works together for my good," the game aligns circumstances in surprising ways. One cannot escape the reflection, but one can change what is reflected. Florence told the story of a woman who longed for prosperity, but constantly spoke of her debts. Her words were prayers, though she did not know it. Every time she mentioned lack, she affirmed lack. Every time she repeated her worries, she fertilized them. And so the game, obedient as ever, responded: more debts, more worry, more lack. But when she was taught to shift her speech, to declare abundance and release her fear, the tide turned. Opportunities appeared, money flowed, debts dissolved, not because the rules had changed, but because her moves had changed. This is the game. To call life a spiritual game is not to trivialize suffering. It is to awaken to the hidden structure beneath it. The storms of loss, sickness, or betrayal are not random punishments. They are signals that something in thought, word, or belief has been misaligned with the law. And the moment alignment is restored, the storm subsides. Florence often said, "There are no lost moves. Every thought, every word, every choice counts." And this truth carries both warning and hope. Warning because careless words can plant thorns. Hope because conscious words can plant roses. The one who has lived in defeat need not remain there. The one who has stumbled for years can stand again. The game does not shame its players. It patiently waits for them to remember. The power was always in their hands. And so, as this first chapter closes, the foundation is laid. Life is not an accident. It is not cruel chaos. It is a spiritual game, ordered by laws that cannot be broken. The question is not whether you are playing. The question is whether you will learn how to play well. And when this realization settles, the next step is inevitable. If life is a game, then words are the pieces. The word as a magic wand. If life is a spiritual game, then words are its most powerful instruments. Florence Scovel Shinn declared it without hesitation. Your word is your wand. What one speaks, one summons. What one declares, one sets in motion. Every sentence is either a curse or a blessing, a chain or a key. From the very beginning of creation, sacred texts have carried this truth. In the beginning was the Word. Light itself was spoken into existence. The universe was not built with bricks or iron, but with utterances of divine command. If creation itself responds to words, why should human lives be any different? Florence observed that most people use their words carelessly, scattering them like seeds across barren soil. They spoke of sickness, then wondered why the body weakened. They spoke of loss, then wondered why opportunities slipped away. They complained of loneliness, then wondered why relationships dissolved. The answer was always the same. The word had gone forth, and it could not return void. She told of a woman who constantly said, "I always miss the train. I'm always late. Nothing ever works out for me." Her friends laughed at the self-pity, but Florence saw the deeper law at work. The woman's words were not jokes, they were instructions. Life, the obedient mirror, carried out the command. Trains left just before she arrived. Appointments fell apart. Delays plagued her steps. It was not fate, but faith in reverse. It was not punishment, but prophecy fulfilled. And when Florence guided her to shift her words, to say, "I am always on time, the way opens before me, everything works together for my good," the rhythm of her life changed. Trains waited, paths cleared, fortunes turned, the words had changed, and so had the world. Words carry vibration. Each sound leaves an imprint upon the unseen field. Even casual remarks, said in jest or complaint, become seeds in the invisible soil of existence. The law does not discriminate between serious declarations and careless chatter. It only knows how to reflect. This is why Florence urged people to guard their tongue as one guards treasure, to speak not of what they fear, but of what they desire, to replace idle chatter with conscious affirmation. Not empty phrases, but words charged with faith, words that create, direct, and command. She often compared the tongue to a sword. It can wound or it can defend. It can cut chains or it can bind a man further. A careless strike may leave scars unseen, but deeply felt. But a skillful strike, a word of healing, a word of power, can turn entire destinies. One man, Florence recounted, had lost his job and fell into despair. Every day he repeated, "I can't find work. There's nothing out there for me. The market is impossible." And so it was. Doors closed before him, for his own words had locked them shut. When Florence corrected him, teaching him to declare, "There is a perfect position prepared for me, and it comes to me by divine right," the tide turned. Within weeks, an unexpected opportunity appeared, not through endless struggle, but through alignment. The spoken word had opened what his fear had sealed. To play the game of life well, the player must learn to use words with intention. Not every passing thought must be spoken. Not every fear must be given breath. Words are too precious to waste on complaint, gossip, or despair. They are wands, and the game listens to their command. And so the challenge is laid before every listener. What words are you speaking daily? Are they shaping prisons, or are they building bridges? Are they draining your strength, or are they summoning your victory? For the law remains, what is spoken is summoned, what is affirmed is made flesh, and what is declared with faith must eventually stand before you. Thus, as this chapter draws to a close, the truth stands clear. The player who masters words masters the game. For words are not mere sounds, they are forces, they are seeds, they are wands of invisible power. And when this lesson is grasped, the next truth rises naturally. If words are wands, then what one sends forth must return. The invisible boomerang, Florence Scovel Shinn, often reminded her students of a simple but unsettling truth. Whatever a person sends out returns. It may return quickly. It may return slowly, but return it will. This is the law of the invisible boomerang. Every thought, every word, every action is cast into the unseen realm, and like a perfectly weighted boomerang, it circles back to the one who released it. People often imagine life as a system of rewards and punishments. But Florence insisted that it is not punishment at all, it is reflection. The law is neutral, just as a mirror is neutral. If one scowls into the mirror, the reflection scowls back. If one smiles, the reflection smiles in return. The mirror does not decide, it only reflects. So too does the game of life. When anger is sent, anger returns. When envy is sown, envy finds its way back. But when love is given, love returns multiplied. When generosity is expressed, generosity circles back in surprising ways. Florence often used the example of careless criticism. A woman may speak harshly of another, convinced that such words vanish into the air. But the words do not vanish. They travel, they gather weight, and in time they return. Not always in the same form, not always from the same person, but always with the same essence. A judgment cast forth becomes a judgment received. A kindness offered becomes a kindness returned. The law is exact. The boomerang never misses its mark. She told the story of a businessman who habitually spoke of others' failures. He criticized colleagues, mocked competitors, and constantly repeated that most ventures were doomed to collapse. It was no surprise then that his own ventures faltered. The very words he had cast against others returned to his own doorstep. His boomerang had come home, but Florence did not leave him in despair. She taught him to reverse his speech, to affirm success not only for himself, but for others. He began declaring, "Every person is guided to their rightful work. Every venture prospers under divine law." And slowly, the reflection changed. Where once his own words had sabotaged him, now they supported him. Success began to flow, not by chance, but by alignment. This is the mercy of the law. Every return is an opportunity to awaken. If the boomerang that comes back is painful, it is not condemnation, but correction. It is a signal to change the throw, to send forth something different. No one is trapped forever in the returns of the past. Every new word, every new thought, every new action creates a new cycle. Florence urged her students to see themselves as archers, aiming arrows of thought and speech into the invisible sky. Some arrows would fall back sharp, cutting because they were dipped in fear or anger. Others would fall back golden, carrying blessings because they were released in faith and love. The choice, she said, was always in the hand of the archer. This chapter, then, confronts every listener with a question. What boomerangs are circling back to you? Are the events of your life echoes of fear spoken long ago? Are your struggles reflections of judgments cast carelessly? Or are they blessings, returning faithfully from words of kindness, faith, and gratitude? The beauty of this law is that nothing is lost. Even the smallest word of good, even the faintest thought of blessing, circles through the unseen and finds its way back, often magnified. The return is certain. And so, as this chapter closes, the rule is clear. Do not fear the law of return. Use it. Send forth only what you wish to receive. Speak only what you desire to hear. Release only what you are willing to welcome back into your life. For the boomerang is always invisible, but never uncertain. And when this truth is embraced, another truth rises to meet it. If words and thoughts return, then the battlefield where they are first launched must be guarded. That battlefield is the imagination. The imagination as the field of battle. Florence Scovel Shinn often said that imagination is the workshop of creation. It is the inner battlefield where victory or defeat is decided long before events unfold in the visible world. The outer life is only the shadow. The real drama plays out in the secret chambers of thought and image. Every person carries within them an invisible screen. Upon this screen, the mind paints pictures all day long. Pictures of fear, pictures of hope, pictures of lack, pictures of abundance. Most are unaware of this constant projection. Yet life is always watching, always reproducing those inner images into outward experiences. If a woman imagines failure repeatedly, she has already rehearsed her downfall. If a man envisions betrayal, he has already invited it. But if one dares to imagine healing, prosperity, and joy, the unseen law begins to shape circumstances to match. The imagination does not rest. It is always sculpting the future. Florence described imagination as a battlefield because it is the place where the greatest struggles occur. Fear wages war there. Doubt builds its fortresses. But faith, armed with vision, can overthrow them. The one who wins within, wins without. The one who loses within, loses without. A woman once came to Florence in despair, certain that she would be evicted from her home. Her thoughts were filled with images of being cast out, her belongings on the street, her children in tears. Florence stopped her and asked, "Why do you rehearse disaster? Why do you paint defeat upon the walls of your mind?" She urged her instead to see herself secure, safe, and provided for, to picture abundance instead of lack, stability instead of loss. And when the woman shifted her inner film, the outer scene shifted as well. Help arrived in unexpected form, and she remained in her home. The battle was not won on the street corner, but in the theater of her imagination. Florence warned her students that imagination could be either servant or saboteur. Left undirected, it often defaulted to fear. It replayed old hurts, rehearsed future disasters, and exaggerated the power of the enemy. But guided by faith, imagination became a divine ally, painting blueprints of success that life itself hurried to construct. She told of an actor who constantly imagined himself failing on stage, forgetting lines, collapsing under pressure. Inevitably, he lived out those scenes in reality. But when he learned to picture himself performing with confidence, hearing applause and radiating presence, his career turned. The battle had been won inside first. The imagination, Florence said, is like fertile soil. It does not choose what seeds to accept. It receives every seed presented, whether of fear or faith, of lack or abundance. The soil never argues. It only produces after its kind. Thus, the wise player of life becomes a careful gardener. He weeds out images of despair. He uproots pictures of failure, and he plants over and over the images of victory, joy, and abundance until they bloom in the outer world. The question then, for every listener is this: what film is playing on the screen of your mind? Do you spend your nights imagining loss, rejection, disaster, or do you dare to picture triumph, healing, provision, and peace? For the law remains. The image held faithfully within must eventually manifest without. The outer life is nothing but the photograph developed from the negatives of imagination. And so, this chapter closes with a call to arms. Guard the battlefield of your imagination. Direct it with intention. Refuse to let fear rehearse your downfall. Instead, let faith rehearse your victory, for whoever rules the imagination rules the game of life. And when this victory is secured, the next step rises naturally. If imagination sets the stage, then faith must be the actor who brings the script to life. Faith as the secret key. Florence Scovel Shinn declared that faith is not merely belief. It is the secret key that unlocks every invisible door in the game of life. Faith is the daring choice to stand on truth, even when appearances scream otherwise. It is the invisible currency that purchases every promise, the unseen bridge that carries one over every obstacle. Most people, Florence observed, live by sight. They believe what they see, and they see only what their fears allow. If circumstances look bleak, they collapse into despair. If doors appear closed, they accept defeat. But the game of life is not won by sight. It is won by faith. Faith speaks to what is not yet visible. Faith calls the invisible into form. Faith holds the picture steady while the outer world scrambles to catch up. It is the patient anchor, the unshakable foundation beneath shifting sands. Florence often quoted, "Faith without works is dead," but she explained that the greatest work of faith is simply to act as though the blessing is already given, to walk as though the door is already open, to rejoice as though the victory is already secured. A man once came to her, desperate for money. He pleaded for help, convinced that lack surrounded him. Florence told him to speak. "God is my instant supply. All that is mine by divine right now comes to me under grace." He repeated it, though at first without conviction, but she urged him to continue, to walk in faith, as if the supply were already on its way. Within days, unexpected funds arrived, not through struggle, but through channels he had never imagined. Faith had turned the invisible key, and the door opened. Faith, Florence taught, is not naive optimism. It is alignment with law, the same way a pilot trusts the laws of aerodynamics, even when gravity resists, so the player of life must trust spiritual law, even when appearances oppose. The plane rises because the pilot trusts the unseen lift more than the visible pull. So too does a life rise when faith trusts divine order more than visible lack. But faith must be protected. Fear is always eager to intrude. Doubt whispers, "It will not work for you." Circumstances shout, "Look at the evidence of your failure." Yet Florence reminded her students that fear is nothing more than inverted faith. It is faith in evil rather than good, faith in loss rather than provision. The same energy that could build miracles when misdirected builds prisons. Thus, the battle is always the same. Will one believe the promise or the problem? Will one hold faith in the unseen law or surrender to the tyranny of appearances? She told of a woman whose health was failing. Doctors spoke of decline, family members prepared for loss, and all evidence pointed to the end. Yet the woman clung to Florence's teaching. She declared daily, "Divine life now floods every cell of my body. I am whole, I am radiant, I am well." At first, her words seemed foolish against the evidence, but she refused to let appearances dictate her faith. Slowly, her strength returned. Day by day, life restored itself. Until one morning, she rose fully healed. Faith had unlocked what medicine could not. Faith, Florence insisted, is the master key. It does not ask, "How will this happen?" It simply declares, "It is already mine." The path may be hidden, but the outcome is certain. Circumstances will bend, people will appear, opportunities will open, all in response to unwavering faith. And so the question for every listener is this: what doors are closed before you now? Is it the door of provision, the door of healing, the door of love, or the door of peace? Whatever the door, the key is the same. Faith, not wishful thinking, not anxious waiting, but faith alive, spoken, acted, and lived. Thus, as this chapter ends, the lesson is sealed. Faith is the secret key to the game of life. Without it, the player stumbles in darkness. With it, every path opens. And once this truth is grasped, another truth emerges naturally. If faith is the key, then fear is the thief. Fear as the treacherous illusion. Florence Scovel Shinn often said that fear is faith turned upside down. It is not the absence of belief, it is belief in the wrong outcome. Fear is faith in loss instead of gain, faith in sickness instead of health, faith in defeat instead of victory. It is the shadow that stalks the game of life, whispering lies into the imagination, disguising itself as caution, realism, or common sense. Fear is the most convincing illusion because it feels real. The heart races, the body trembles, images of disaster march across the mind as if they were inevitable truths. Yet Florence reminded her students, fear is a trick. It has no substance of its own. It borrows power only from the attention given to it. Like a phantom, it vanishes the moment the light of faith shines upon it. She told the story of a woman who constantly feared illness. Every cough, every ache, every passing discomfort became for her a prophecy of doom. She read medical journals, searched for symptoms, and rehearsed diseases in her mind until they felt certain. And soon, her body began to mirror the images she entertained. Her fear had become creative power in reverse. When Florence confronted her, she declared firmly, "You are not a victim of disease. You are a victim of your own imagination misused. Turn the picture, and the body must follow." The woman began daily affirmations, replacing fear-filled images with visions of strength, vitality, and wholeness. And over time, the shadow of illness faded. Her health returned not by chance, but by a shift in belief. Fear, Florence taught, always disguises itself. Sometimes it wears the mask of prudence. Don't take the risk, you might fail. Sometimes it cloaks itself in responsibility. Be realistic, don't dream too high. But underneath every mask lies the same poison, a refusal to trust divine law. She compared fear to a barking dog chained to a post. The noise is loud, the teeth are sharp, but the chain is real. If one dares to walk past, the dog cannot reach. But if one stands frozen, intimidated by the barking, the journey halts. So too does fear paralyze the soul, not by actual power, but by persuasion. The game of life cannot be won by those who bow to fear. Every move made in fear plants seeds of defeat. Words spoken in fear create walls instead of doors. Actions born of fear lead not to safety, but to greater entanglement. Florence urged her students to resist fear at its first whisper, to declare instead, "I walk in faith, not in fear. Nothing can stand against divine law. Nothing can oppose the good that is mine." For the moment faith is spoken, the illusion of fear dissolves. Fear is treacherous because it is persuasive, but it is still only an illusion. And once the illusion is unmasked, its power evaporates. The soul remembers its strength, the player remembers the rules, and the game shifts back into balance. So the question for every listener is this: where has fear been barking in your life? Which door have you refused to open because fear convinced you it was locked? Which dream have you buried because fear painted pictures of failure? Remember, The dog is chained. The illusion has no true power. Step forward, and the chain will hold. Walk in faith, and the game will respond. Thus, this chapter ends with a warning and a promise. Fear is the greatest illusion, the shadow that steals joy before joy can arrive. But once seen for what it is, fear becomes powerless. And when fear is silenced, the inner compass is heard more clearly. That compass is intuition. Intuition as the inner compass. Florence Scovel Shinn often reminded her students that every soul carries a map within. Not a map of roads and cities, but a living compass that points unfailingly toward the right step, the right door, the right opportunity. She called this compass intuition, the quiet voice of divine wisdom that never shouts, never argues, but always knows. In the game of life, players often wander into detours because they ignore this inner guide. They follow fear instead of faith, logic instead of listening, noise instead of silence. And in doing so, they miss the gentle pull of intuition, which could have spared them wasted years and unnecessary struggle. Florence explained that intuition is not the product of human reasoning. It is the whisper of spirit. It is the signal that comes from beyond the mind, often dismissed as coincidence, instinct, or mere imagination. Yet those who learn to honor it discover that intuition is the most reliable compass of all. She told of a woman who felt strongly not to board a certain train. Her friends mocked her hesitation, insisting she was foolish, but she obeyed the quiet nudge of her heart and stayed behind. Hours later, she learned that the train had been delayed by disaster. Her safety was not the result of chance, but of obedience to the inner voice. Florence insisted that such guidance is always available. It may come as a sudden knowing, a phrase that rises unbidden, or a persistent feeling that cannot be ignored. It does not reason, it reveals. And those who heed it walk paths of surprising ease, while those who dismiss it often stumble into needless storms. But intuition requires trust. The rational mind demands evidence. It asks, why should I take this path? What proof do I have? Yet intuition offers no proof. It offers only peace. The choice is always the same, to follow the mind's calculations or the soul's compass. Florence reminded her students that intuition always speaks in alignment with divine law. It never leads to harm, never tempts to fear, never contradicts love. It may lead to unexpected places, but it always leads to good. She compared intuition to the needle of a compass in the wilderness. The traveler may not see the destination, but if he trusts the needle, every step carries him closer. If he ignores it and wanders by guesswork, he may walk in circles for years. So too in life. Intuition does not reveal the whole journey at once, but it always gives the next step. One man, Florence recounted, desired to start a business but was paralyzed by indecision. He made lists, compared options, sought endless advice, yet clarity never came. Finally, in silence, he felt a quiet nudge toward a particular idea. It seemed small, even insignificant, but he followed it. That small beginning grew into a flourishing enterprise. Reason had offered confusion. Intuition had offered direction. The challenge for every listener is clear. Do you honor the inner compass, or do you drown it beneath the noise of doubt and the voices of others? How many doors have remained unopened because you ignored the whisper that said, "This is the way, walk in it"? Florence urged her students to cultivate silence, to make space for the inner guide to speak. For intuition rarely speaks in chaos. It speaks in stillness. It waits for the heart to quiet, for the mind to yield, and then it whispers the next step. Thus this chapter closes with a promise. The game of life is not without direction. Every soul carries its own compass. Those who learn to follow it discover paths of ease, doors of provision, and victories without struggle. And when this compass is honored, another law naturally reveals itself, the law of love. for intuition always leads not only to personal good, but to the greater harmony of all. Love as the code of victory. Florence Scovel Shinn declared with unwavering certainty, love is the strongest force in the universe. In the game of life, love is not sentiment, not fleeting emotion, not fragile attachment. It is the divine code of victory, the law that dissolves resistance, heals wounds, and opens doors that effort alone could never unlock. Many try to win the game with force. They push, demand, compete, and struggle. But Florence insisted that true triumph comes not through aggression, but through alignment with love. For love carries a frequency that harmonizes discord, draws supply, restores relationships, and disarms enemies without a word of battle. She taught that when love is spoken, fear retreats. When love is acted upon, obstacles dissolve. When love is chosen, the invisible laws of life bend in the player's favor. One woman once came to her, tormented by an enemy. She spoke constantly of betrayal, injustice, and revenge, but Florence corrected her sharply. Every enemy is an opportunity to practice love. Do not fight fire with fire. Speak love, and the fire will burn out. The woman obeyed, though reluctantly. She began affirming, I love every soul. The light of divine love shines through every person and every situation. At first, her heart resisted, but as she persisted, her bitterness softened. Soon, her enemy withdrew. The situation that once seemed hopeless dissolved without confrontation. The code of love had won the victory. Florence explained that love is the great dissolver. It washes away resentment, melts barriers, and clears the invisible path. Hatred binds, but love liberates. Fear contracts, but love expands. Where love reigns, resistance has no soil in which to grow. She told of a man who lived in constant conflict with his co-workers. Arguments flared daily. Projects collapsed under the weight of discord. When he came to Florence, expecting strategies for defense, she gave him only one command. Bless them. See divine love in them. Speak no word of complaint, only words of blessing. He resisted at first, convinced it was weakness, but when he applied it, the atmosphere changed. The tension dissolved, cooperation emerged, and within months he was promoted. Not by force, but by love. Love, Florence said, is not blind. It does not excuse injustice or deny reality. It simply chooses to see beyond appearances, to affirm the divine within all, even when hidden. It sees not the mask of fear or anger, but the spark of spirit waiting to be recognized. This choice transforms not only the outer situation, but the inner player. For love heals the heart of the one who gives it as surely as it blesses the one who receives it. The challenge then is simple, yet profound. When confronted with opposition, will you answer with fear, anger, and resentment? Or will you answer with love, knowing that love is the true code of victory? The game of life responds to the code you choose. Fear multiplies fear. Hatred multiplies hatred. But love multiplies blessing until victory is inevitable. Thus, this chapter ends with the clearest truth of all. Love never fails. It is the language of divine law, the key that fits every lock, the code that secures every victory. And once this is understood, another truth rises in its place. Love and abundance are not separate, for when love flows, abundance follows. And so we move into chapter abundance as the natural state. Florence Scovel Shinn often declared that lack is an illusion. It is not the natural order of life, but the shadow created by fear, doubt, and wrong belief. Abundance, she said, is the true state of the universe. It flows like air, like sunlight, like the endless rhythm of the sea. To believe in scarcity is to live in blindness, but to awaken to abundance is to live in truth. She reminded her students that nature never withholds. The trees do not ration their fruit. The stars do not limit their light. The ocean does not measure each wave carefully before releasing it. Creation itself is extravagant, pouring forth beauty and provision without calculation. If such abundance fills the natural world, why should human lives be excluded? The answer, Florence explained, is not in divine law, but in human thought. Scarcity is man-made, built from fear, spoken into being by words of lack, and reinforced by imagination rehearsing disaster. But the moment thought changes, the moment faith declares abundance, supply begins to flow again. One man once came to Florence, crushed by debt. He spoke of bills, of lack, of endless struggle. She stopped him sharply. Never speak of debt again, speak only of abundance. Declare, I have a surplus of supply. All that is mine by divine right flows to me now. He resisted, for the evidence before him shouted otherwise. But Florence insisted, the game of life does not respond to evidence, it responds to belief. He obeyed, speaking words of abundance daily, and within weeks opportunities opened. Unexpected income appeared. The weight of debt dissolved and prosperity took its place. The law had responded as it always does. Florence taught that abundance is not greed, nor is it selfishness. True abundance includes enough for oneself and overflow for others. It is the freedom to give generously, to bless without fear, to circulate wealth instead of hoarding it. She reminded her students, the game of life is a game of giving and receiving. To block the flow in one direction is to block it in both. Thus she urged them to give, not recklessly, but faithfully. To give joy, to give kindness, to give resources when guided by intuition. For giving is planting, and the harvest cannot fail to return. A woman once feared to give even the smallest offering, believing she had too little to spare. Florence encouraged her to release it in faith, declaring that the law of return would multiply it. The woman obeyed, trembling, but gave. Soon after, unexpected supply came to her in multiples of what she had released. She discovered firsthand that abundance is not unlocked by grasping, but by releasing. The challenge for every listener is clear. Do you live as if abundance is natural, or as if scarcity is inevitable? Do your words declare overflow, or do they rehearse lack? Do your actions circulate blessings, or do they clutch tightly in fear? For the law remains, as one believes, so it is. And those who align with the truth of abundance discover that provision flows without end. Thus this chapter closes with certainty. Scarcity is a lie, but abundance is eternal truth. And when the player of life awakens to this truth, prosperity becomes not a dream, but a daily reality. Yet prosperity alone is not the final prize. For the true victory is not only wealth, health, or harmony, but spiritual triumph. And so we move into chapter, the spiritual victory. Florence Scovel Shinn often reminded her students that the highest triumph in the game of life is not wealth, not recognition, not even health alone. The true victory is spiritual. It is the alignment of the soul with divine law, the realization that man is not a victim of fate, but a co-creator with God. Every chapter of her teaching points toward this summit. Words are wands, thoughts are seeds, imagination is the battlefield, faith is the key, fear is the illusion, love is the code. Abundance is the natural state. But all of these converge in one radiant truth. Man is spirit clothed in form, playing a divine game where the rules are eternal. Spiritual victory is not escape from the world, but mastery within it. It is the ability to walk through storms without fear, to face opposition with love, to meet lack with faith, and to declare truth when appearances scream otherwise. It is the power to live as if the invisible is more real than the visible, because it is. Florence often said, "There is no enemy but fear, no failure but doubt, no limit but unbelief." To win spiritually is to silence these false masters and stand firm in the knowledge of divine order. The player who does this discovers that even apparent defeat is only temporary, a stepping stone toward greater alignment. For nothing is ever truly lost in the game of life. It only changes form, waiting to return when faith calls it back. She told the story of a man who had lost everything: money, reputation, friends. In despair, he sought her counsel. Florence did not comfort him with sympathy. Instead, she handed him the sword of truth. Nothing is lost in divine mind. What belongs to you will return, multiplied, if you call it forth with faith. The man obeyed, declaring daily that all he had lost was restored by divine right. In time, new opportunities rose, greater than the ones he had lost. What had seemed like destruction was revealed as transformation. He had won not only outward restoration, but inward mastery. The true spiritual victory. Spiritual victory is not about escaping trials. It is about transforming them. It is about seeing every difficulty as an opportunity to practice faith, to wield words of power, to trust the invisible law. It is the recognition that every loss carries a hidden seed of gain, every ending hides a beginning, and every obstacle is a disguised gift. Florence urged her students to live as victors, not victims, to rise each morning declaring, "I am a spiritual being. Nothing can oppose the law of good. Nothing can defeat the divine plan for my life." Such a declaration, spoken with conviction, does not merely inspire, it creates. It sets the vibration of victory into motion, summoning unseen allies and aligning outer events with inner truth. And so, the true player of life does not measure victory by possessions alone, nor by fleeting triumphs. The true victory is to live in harmony with divine law, to remain unshaken in faith, fearless in love, and abundant in spirit. It is to walk through the visible world while rooted in the invisible, to know beyond doubt that life is not a cruel chance, but a perfect game designed for the soul's awakening. Thus, as this final chapter closes, the truth shines clear. The spiritual victory is already within reach. It is not distant, not reserved for a chosen few, but available to anyone who dares to play consciously, faithfully, lovingly. For the game of life is not about surviving, it is about awakening. And once the player awakens, victory is inevitable. The game completed. The journey through Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings has reached its circle's end. From the first whisper that life is not chaos but a game, to the last declaration that the greatest triumph is spiritual victory, the truth has unfolded step by step. And now, as the pieces settle, the whole picture is revealed. Life is not an accident. It is a design, not random but ordered, not cruel but merciful, not against us, but waiting for us to remember its rules. Florence devoted her life to showing that anyone could master this invisible game. Not by chance, not by force, but by alignment with law. The same law that governs the stars and tides governs also the smallest details of a human life, and when aligned with it, life ceases to be a struggle. It becomes a rhythm, a harmony, a dance between seen and unseen. The rules, though hidden to most, are simple. Words create, thoughts return, imagination builds, faith unlocks, fear deceives, intuition guides, love conquers, abundance flows, and the victory is spiritual. Each chapter has unveiled one of these laws, not as theory, but as living practice. Together they form the pattern of mastery. Together, they transform defeat into triumph. Florence's students came from every walk of life, men in business, women in despair, children caught in fear. Each brought their troubles, convinced they were bound by fate, and each, when taught to play by the rules, discovered miracles. Not because Florence had magic of her own, but because she revealed the magic already present in every soul. So now the listener is faced with the same invitation. For the game is not Florence's alone, it is yours. Every word you speak is a move, every thought you hold is a step, Every belief you cling to is a strategy, and the board is before you even now. Perhaps, as you have listened, you have recognized patterns in your own life, echoes of fear, habits of complaint, rehearsals of defeat. Do not despair. The beauty of this game is that a single new move can change the course entirely. No past mistake binds you forever. The present is always a fresh beginning. Florence would often say, "There is always a way out for every man. If he listens to the voice of intuition, he will be guided to his right path." This is the hope of the game. The law never abandons. It is always waiting, always ready to respond to a new declaration of faith, a new image of victory, a new alignment with love. So pause for a moment. What words will you speak today? Will you declare scarcity, or will you speak abundance? Will you rehearse fear, or will you imagine triumph? Will you bow to appearances, or will you walk by faith? The choice is yours, and the game is listening. Remember, the mirror does not argue. It reflects, and life is the same. Whatever you project, it returns. So project only what you desire to see. Send forth only what you are willing to receive. Speak only what you are ready to live. The call of Florence's teaching is not passive comfort, but active mastery. It does not say, "Wait, and life will improve." It says, "Speak, imagine, believe, and life must obey." This is not arrogance, but alignment with the eternal order of spirit. For those who doubt, Florence offered this challenge. Try it. Speak new words. Hold new images. Act in faith. And watch as the outer world bends to match the inner shift. She never asked her students to accept blindly. She asked them to play consciously, to test the law and see for themselves its perfect faithfulness. And now, at the end of this journey, the invitation extends to you to stop wandering blindly, to stop repeating the same moves that have brought the same defeats, to step onto the board with intention, declaring, imagining, believing, and loving with purpose. For the victory is not reserved for saints or sages. It is for every soul who dares to remember the rules. Florence's legacy endures not because her words were clever, but because they were true. They resonate across generations because the law she taught cannot expire. It is as eternal as gravity, as faithful as the sunrise, as present as the air. And those who align with it in any age discover the same miracles. So let this be your declaration. I play the game of life with wisdom. I speak only words of power. I imagine only images of victory. I walk by faith, not by fear. I follow intuition as my compass. I choose love as my code. I accept abundance as my state. And I claim spiritual victory as my truth. Let these words be not merely heard, but spoken aloud, written down, planted within the soil of imagination. For once declared, they set the law in motion. And once the law is in motion, the outcome is certain. Before this narration closes, Florence would ask you to bear witness. Choose one word, a word of victory, of abundance, of healing, of love, and write it boldly in the comments, not as decoration, but as declaration. For every word written is a seed sown, and every seed sown must return with a harvest. Thus, the circle is complete. The board is before you. The pieces are in your hand. The rules have been revealed, and the game, eternal and patient, waits for your next move. Play not as a victim, but as a victor. Play not in fear, but in faith. Play not against, but with the divine order that governs all. For the game of life is not meant to crush you. It is meant to crown you. And when you play with love, with faith, with vision, and with truth, the victory is inevitable.